which deeply links the environment, but it's less of sort of regulatory, toxic control. There's more how we set ourselves up for success now and in the future. So there's the Clean Energy Transformation Act, which requires all of our energy to be fossil fuel free by 2035. Don't quote me on that. But there's, with that and with the Carbon Commitment Act, the CCA, there's small businesses that are popping up to try and subvert some of these laws, so we're trying to close the rules there. We're working to make sure that large energy users who will likely raise the bill for consumers in the future, when they come on the grid, i.e. data centers, there are other large energy users, but the primary one currently is data centers, pay their fair share, make sure that those costs aren't getting passed down to consumers, and then just trying to make sure that we can upgrade our grid through reconductoring of wires or other ways to better site clean energy, because that only date for the Clean Energy Transformation Act that we talked about earlier is coming soon and will require a significant investment if we want to get to 100% clean energy by that date. So those are sort of a broad overview of what's happening in environment and energy. Finance, which you guys are likely more aware of, and then appropriations is how do we make sure that we spend our money correctly and with our morals in mind when we create our budget. So with that, this is one of my favorite events of the year because we get to hear from you. So I will sit down and so that we can hear questions from you guys.
All right, well, we have a good crop of questions to get started. Just a reminder, if you have a question in the audience or you come up with a question, there are note cards there in the back. You can pass them along to folks in the back who will then go through them and bring them up here. But we'll get started with our first question, and we'll ask that we keep the answers pretty brief so we can get through as many as possible. It says, I'm politically a minority in this room. I've noticed I am less of a political minority in my community than one might think or assume. What are you doing to increase outreach to all of your constituents that are represented, to make sure they're represented, instead of just the people who subscribe to your newsletters?
Great question. Well, I mean, I think we receive emails and phone calls and are trying to be as responsive as possible to make sure that everyone, whether you are the majority of, where maybe the 37th is or not, whether that's on gun policy, tax policy. And so I think that's one piece that we do. And really it is because of the way that we're part-time legislators. I mean, during the interim, we do all try to come out into where someone invites us to come out. I've done, coffee hours, but I mean, I think we're always looking for different ways that we can better reach out, but we are definitely responsive. So if you have reached out to one of us and don't feel like you got a response or an engagement, I definitely want to know about that. So thank you for raising that question here, and I definitely look forward to connecting with you.
I would simply add this. As the senator indicated, we are a part-time legislature. One of the things you may not know, and it's something that I fought very, very hard against for many years in the House, and we got some movement, is we all have to abide by rules, and there are different rules in the Senate than there are in the House. One of the rules in the House that I had to fight against was when I produced my newsletter, which was back in the day when it was a paper newsletter. I was shocked to find that the House of Representatives would only mail to registered voters. And I said, wait a second, that is not representative. It's not representative. Too many of my constituents are actually not yet registered voters. They may be somewhere on the continuum of becoming a citizen. We were able to get a minor modification, but I will tell you, the House policy is still discriminatory. Now, I can fight it from the inside, but it would be really helpful for people from the outside to say, it doesn't matter if you are residing within a legislative district, you are a taxpayer. You're a taxpayer. You should be able to hear from your representative. So that is one thing that I would say. The other thing that I would say is that as the House has moved to be paperless, it is a challenge for people of a certain generation to adapt. Speaking of myself, we don't actually have the budget any longer for a paper newsletter to go out. And I also think that is discriminatory because too many people in our community do not have access to technology or may not know how to utilize technology. So I don't have a great answer other than just to reinforce what the senator said, which is if you would like for us to come out and speak to a particular group, always welcome those opportunities. If you would like to be part of our newsletter, please contact us. And then I think we also are on social media.
Yeah, I'll quickly, very quickly add on that. So what I hear in that question is, how can you interact with us better? We mentioned a couple things in the newsletters, which are us talking to you, but those aren't the best ways for you to talk to us. If you have emailed my office, you hopefully have gotten an answer. We're trying to respond to everyone. If you haven't, please come chat with me and we can figure out why that hasn't worked. My question back, which this is not a great forum for that, but if you stay around and come up and ask me, is what would be a better form of communication for you? It may not be a newsletter, it may be social media. We try. I think we could do it. I'm jealous of other legislators who do a better job of social media. Let me say that. But maybe that is your form of preferred communication. Just come talk to us so that we can try to solve that. Because I think all three of us are dedicated to interacting with folks regardless of what their viewpoints are.
All right, our next question comes from Camden. Says, I'm concerned about the cuts to the federal government made to food stamps, Medicaid, and other programs. Will you support the millionaire's tax to help make up that lost funding? And as we're talking about the millionaire's tax, which I think has universal support here, I think people may be interested in hearing about where that currently stands, some of the amendments we've heard about, and where we stand on those.
I guess maybe I'll start with that. Some of us have had the pleasure of voting for it already, I think, which is great, and I know Representative Santos and I are excited to vote for it when it comes to the House. Maybe I'll back up very quickly and talk about some of the issues that we're dealing with at a large scale. I think there's, if you read the news, you could get the impression that there is a lot of debate between the governor and the legislature about the income tax. While there is some differences of opinion, and I would ask you to find a piece of legislation, like a 100-year piece of legislation where there wasn't differences of opinion, I would first start with the amount of agreement that we do have, which I find very, very heartening. We passed a bunch of passes last year, and the difference of opinion between the House, the Senate, and the governor was far larger. So the fact that we are all on the same page about having an income tax is great. Where we spend it and having conversations about that, I think that's part of the legislative process, so it does not bother me that we have differences of opinion there. What we do in terms of the shape of that bill we have to make sure that we get out of the House, the Senate, and signed by the governor. But then we also have to make sure that it's carefully crafted because it will get challenged in the courts. So we have to make sure that it is a narrow bill that asks the questions of the courts that we want to have asked, and it doesn't get drug into some other place that could end in a worse outcome for us. And then once it survives the courts, it will also get challenged on the ballot. And so we need to make sure that where we're sending that money is supported by the people of the state, so that when you get the question of do you want to repeal this tax, the answer is a resounding no, because you care about funding our schools, you care about funding our healthcare system, you care about food assistance. So those are the larger issues that personally I think are the biggest issues that we need to be paying attention to, whereas the little squabbles that make nice media headlines between Senate, House, and the governor are less important.
I think we may have covered that question. I also want to direct our legislators' attention to a very helpful timer that we have right up there. That helps us get through all of these questions, and so there's no obligation to use all of the time on the timer, but we want to definitely try and not use time beyond the time on the timer, so we can get through as many questions as possible. Was there anything anyone had to add on that last question, or would you want to move on to the next one? The next question is from Colin. Wondering, why were Democrats voting to repeal the estate tax?
So with the millionaire's tax, and there are, it's for people that are earning $1 million a year, and it's on the 10% above. So anything above $1 million is what they're getting taxed on, and the way that's proposed, right? But there are entrepreneurs, there's AI folks that, investors that have been bringing things up to the rate. And the same folks that, when we look at the capital gains tax that we passed a few years ago, there were a lot of carve-outs in that. But as we're thinking about who's paying the capital gains, who's paying the millionaire's tax, there's some overlaps. And our estate tax across the nation is the highest by 6. The proposal that was out there, that I don't think I voted for, but it did pass off the Senate floor, was to bring our estate tax to the next level, which is Hawaii. So we're still the highest, rate for estate tax in the nation, but now we're at least at the same level as one other state. And it's looking at, again, what we passed the millionaire's tax, the millionaire's tax is not going to help this budget or the next budget. Even if there's no litigation, we're looking at least 18 months to 3 years for that to really make a difference. And so we need to be able to get it passed, signed by the governor, and then we have to beat it at the ballot. And so I think that estate tax decision, that in order for make sure the millionaire's tax comes through, we need to be able to work with some of the millionaires out there that generally support us, but also are trying to make sure that we have more folks supporting us than that are going to be fighting against us. So that's my understanding of that. Do I agree with it? No. But that's the context, and we'll see what the House does with it.
Anything to add there? Are we good to move on? Okay, next question. With expected budget cuts, how do you plan to protect funding for schools and early learning? Especially in the 37th, we've seen the effects of school funding costs that fail our Black and brown kids in Southeast Seattle. How do you plan to protect the funding?
Thank you very much for that question. I think it's an essential question, and the first thing I would say is last year when we did adopt the biennial budget, you will notice that the only budget that did not suffer from cuts was the basic education budget. And the reason for that is that some of you might recall when we went through the McCleary decision where the state was sued because we didn't fully fund education. One of the pronouncements of the Supreme Court was that our obligation was total and that the state, the legislature, may not cut basic education for a fiscal exigency. So once we've funded education, we cannot take it back. Now, there are those of you who are in the room who are going to say, but these things got cut, And those things got cut, and that is true. But those are not part of the constitutionally required basic education that funds schools, teachers, and classrooms. Now, there are a lot of activities that go on in our schools that are outside of basic education. Those were subject to cuts. So I need to draw that distinction. But I really want to draw attention to the cuts in early learning, because that is heartbreaking to me. Early learning is not part of our paramount duty. Early learning is not our constitutional obligation, even if it makes total logical sense. So I am trying to make sure that we are, to the extent that we can continue to support early learning, I'm trying to find ways through the K-12 budget to ensure that we're expanding our support for the Working Connections childcare, particularly for high frame reduced lunch populations and populations that are in so-called childcare deserts.
All right, next question. I know I've heard you talk about this before, Representative Street. AI data centers that Microsoft and Amazon want to build in our state use huge amounts of energy and water, even more than current data centers. I'm concerned about the stress on the electrical grid, our ability to meet our climate goals with this increased demand, as well as the higher costs for regular customers, not to mention all the water needed for these data center cooling systems. I'm wondering what can be done about these concerns.
Sure, I guess I can do that one. So the first thing is, I think it was House Bill. We have a bill that we've had is going to the Senate around making sure that data centers can pay their fair share of utility costs, infrastructure and utility costs. In looking at that bill or the policy behind it, there seems to be general consensus from the utilities that so far the data centers have paid their infrastructure costs, which is a good thing. So when a data center comes into a community, they have been paying for the upgrades to the substations to connect to the power grid, and then they have been paying a large amount of property taxes, which is where you get things like the Miracle of Quincy, where they have a new school, a new fire station, new police station, and things like that. So far, data centers seem to have been paying for their way in terms of rates and infrastructure. However, one of the places that I'm very concerned about is going forward as we use up more and more of our energy, that is going to require us to generate more and more energy. And then they have the question of, do we generate that with clean, sustainable forms of energy, and who pays for that? And so that's also what this bill tries to get at, is looking forward. How do we make sure that we meet our energy demands, and in the way that these consumers, large consumers of energy, particularly data centers, are paying for that? And so I think this will be a thing that we take a first bite of the apple at this year with the data center bill, but we're going to have to continue looking at in terms of, I mentioned earlier, CETA or energy transformation. How do we do upgrades to our grid and make sure that that doesn't fall on us, the ratepayers, it falls on the folks who are putting these new demands on the grid.
All right, our next question. Lisa says, I walked up and down stairs, knocking on doors, asking people to vote for the Climate Commitment Act. How can the legislature take money that we chose for climate action for the general fund?
Great question. And, and I, someone that was the prime sponsor of KILAC in a second on that climate commitment bill, it was very jarring to see that the governor's budget initially does have a lot of money going out to pay for something really important that we all also support within working families rebates. Now, I unfortunately, when I looked back at the law, how we written and what were the eligible uses, the first thing that's eligible is income family. So he's within the law, but not necessarily at all within the intent. A lot of us that fought so hard for the climate commitment. So I'll just say that the budgets are gonna come out, the Senate budget comes out at 3 p.m. on Sunday. And many of us have been advocating to find a different way to fund the working families rebates and make sure that the money that we put for climate commitment is actually leveraging to actually transform our addiction on pollution and fuels and the source of energy. So I'm hopeful that the Senate budget will look different than the governor's budget, and then, you know, the House will put out theirs, and then we'll be negotiating. So I think this is definitely an area where many of us agree. I just want to use the last 19 seconds to talk about childcare, because it is really, as the chair, as a number of ways and means, it is a big issue. I'll just say Senate bill, or it's Senate bill, but it's a House bill that is moving, so I can't remember the House bill number. But 5062 Child Care Workforce Board, and this is a bill that we have to move forward so that we build and leverage different power, so that we actually do fund childcare as the critical infrastructure that it is, for the rest of our economy moving forward. So that is a little sliver of hope that I think we all need to get behind and make sure it gets to the governor's desk this year.
Thank you. Next question comes from Patricia. She says, thank you for your support of SB 5862, which provides a cost of living adjustment for Plan 1 retirees of the Teachers Retirement System and Public Employees Retirement System in Washington State. Will you support this COLA in the final budget?
Yes, the first step to that budget, I think all three of us should vote for COLA increases for First One and other retirees in the past, and hope to do it in the future. I know there's conversations about other ways that we could fund ongoing COLAs, like there's the left one, which is the firefighters. That pension is thankfully very overfunded, I think about 180%, so we took that down to 120%, which would still make it solvent for all benefits that we promised those folks. We could put that money towards things like maybe a First One ongoing COLA or other types of things. So those are, I'd say, things where, again, we're very aligned on, have voted for in the past, and would like to see that in the budget going forward.
All right, next question comes from Rebecca. What is the state doing to identify and track efforts by ICE and/or its subcontractors to purchase and lease space for detention centers in Washington?
So, I mean, I think there are not any specific bills on that. I think the focus has been on where we actually have control, and I think a piece of it is making sure Department of Health has real authority to go in to these facilities and be able to find. And so the main for-profit facility, which is the Geo Group, but as someone that has accompanied people to their appointments, right? And you know what we all know is Geo is making profits everywhere they can. And so not only do they have the detention center here and across the nation, so many other places, but they're also now the ones that are profiting when we don't put them in, when we don't take our immigrant families and put them in jail, but let them stay in the community that we surveyed. So they're also the ones that are doing the surveillance. And you know, I went to a Tacoma business park with them, and you know, attended that. So I know those kinds of facilities are happening. I mean, I think there are a lot of bills going on right now that, you know, are looking at prohibitions, right? So Senate Bill 5906, Senate Bill 6002, which is about the flop cameras, 6286, which is Orwell's defining ICE detentions. We have 6080, which is concerning contracts between the United States and county municipal jails for committing or confining individuals in federal custody. We have 5967, which is about protecting health data. And so I know we have HB 2165, which is around enforcement identification. So we are definitely looking at everywhere that we can through our state efforts be able to try to hold ICE accountable and protect our communities. But I think that piece, there's not a piece of legislation that I know of that's happening this session.
Yeah, let's just add a few more of those isolated bills. There's the one around preventing law enforcement officers from wearing masks. Flock, as Senator Saldaña mentioned, forcing employers to notify their employees when the federal government's going to do a I-9. I-9 is checking immigration paperwork in if that's going to happen before it happens, reporting at detention, preventing ICE from entering daycare, schools, and hospitals, requiring folks to wear body cams. Representative Santos's bill that she mentioned around taxing for-profit detention centers. Those are a handful of other bills that are related to the things that we're seeing.
All right, our next question from Bruce. What is being done to protect our community from the impact of our racist, rapist, convict, pedophile president? And what can we do to protect ourselves?
First of all, I don't think any one of us has anything to share with you that you don't already know and that you aren't already doing. So if you've participated in any of the No Kings marches, if you've gone and supported folks in the detention center, which by the way, there's going to be a day of remembrance at the Northwest Detention Center today at 1 o'clock. Please join us. You already know, and we in Seattle in particular have been here before. You all remember what happened during the WTO riots. We know how to organize, we know how to make our voices heard. What we are doing in the legislature is trying to throw up all of the shields that we can, whether they be legal shields, whether they be protected economic shields. And I think I was just reading an interesting article recently that talks about our constitutional obligation to run up the red flag, but that would have to be done with the other states. And so that's something that is a little late to initiate in this legislative session, but I think it's something that we will be discussing during the interim for the following legislative session.
Yeah, I think the other piece too is it's easy for us to focus on that one individual, but this is, it has nothing to do with them. I mean, for people, many of us that, you know, come from other countries, and we've seen that, and the United States of America is not any different than any other nation in the world. And our democracy is being tested, and it is, you're here on a Saturday, but many folks are not paying attention, or are so afraid they're just trying to like focus, right? So I think the big thing that we can do is actually keep talking to our neighbors, making people feel connected, and making sure that we're countering the isolation. We are at the state level as our legislators, you know, working very closely with our Attorney General. Last year, we made sure that his funding was not cut, so that he'd have his civil division would be strong. You know, I get to be the representative for the Senate to be meeting regularly with the AG's office and the governor's office to make sure the legislation we're moving forward only reinforces and strengthens his ability to be able to sue the federal administration and win. And so this year, we're giving him we're passing legislation to increase his ability to do enforcement in wage, in anti-discrimination policies, and so that he's able to have more tools to be able to be more responsive when we're seeing these kinds of infringements on our data that is happening. And so I think that's, you know, how we're doing that is making sure that our AG is equipped to be able to defend the laws that we're passing and to be able to fight against what's happening there. I think we're in our official capacities here, but I think it's really important that we're organizing, so that we can talk about after the legislative session how we keep on organizing.
So I thank Senator Saldaña for bringing up our very capable AG Nick Brown, and how we have funded him to keep doing the great work that he's doing. I also have to give a shout out to our federal representatives like Rep. Jayapal, who's making sure that we can still get these Epstein files and hold people accountable. Those are all part of how we shield from things coming out of Washington. The thing I would also like to sort of call into this is being unguarded, how we're trying to like grow resiliency within our community. Because the things that are happening at the federal level aren't going to be able to be undone very quickly. We're going to be living with the ramifications of the cuts to the federal government and just Doge and all the greatness that is coming from all these great ideas out of Trump. Those will be things that we have to live on after he's gone, and it's going to take a long time to rebuild those. And so when we three can work together well on the budget to bring back money to our district, we build community resilience, we build organizations that help each other out in dealing with those cuts. And so that's one of the things that, again, I can't be more appreciative of these two other leaders.
Could you talk about the capital budget and requests from nonprofits who have submitted a capital budget request?
Sure, I guess I can start with that one. So the capital budget, easiestly, you will see the capital budget come out on Monday from, I think, both the House and the Senate. So you will know what is in those for folks who have submitted requests already. That's a really, really short answer. I think the more important thing here is understanding how the capital budget works. We operate on a biennial budget, so every 2 years we do a large budget. It is best that you get your requests into that large budget. This current budget is a supplemental, so it's a small budget. We do not expect to see a ton of investment there. We expect to see that larger investment in the biennial capital budget. What does that mean for you guys? If you are looking for a capital budget ask, then please get your requests into, figure out what bucket of money you want. Commerce has a large, many sets of money. We get local and community projects, which is often what you think of when you come to ask for us during session. That is a very small bucket. We probably get about $2 to $3 million between us to divide out. Luckily, we've been very good with that. We got an $11 million ask for Tubman through a couple of years ago, so we've been able to navigate that very well. However, it's a very, very small budget compared to the different buckets that Commerce has that are competitive grants. Those competitive grants, you need to apply by mid-summer this year to be considered for this next biennial budget. So that's the really important thing. If you're looking for capital money over $500,000 or $600,000, please go look at the different buckets of Commerce money. Get an application into those competitive processes so that it is then eligible for those buckets come this next capital cycle.
Thank you. Next question is from Ashley. She says, thank you, Representative Santos, on your leadership on House Bill 1408, which establishes funding for community preservation and development authorities. Thank you, Representative Street, for the emergency amendment and work and appropriations. And thank you, Senator Saldaña, for your leadership on the companion bill. How can constituents help to get it passed in the Senate and signed by the governor?
Yeah, so I believe we have, and Ashley probably knows if it's when we're having the hearing. Thursday. Okay, that's Thursday. So we're gonna have a hearing in Ways and Means on Thursday. In Ways and Means, we hear so many bills. So the best strategy is for if there can be a contingent of the 37 to come down, wear something that's marked, like a button or color, and then you have probably 1 to 2 people signing in to testify to make why is this financial policy necessary now in this moment, and refer back if there's more people in the room. And then as many 37 folks or people can sign in, wishing to, pro, but not wishing to testify. You can either do a written testimony or you can just sign in pro, so that we can show that there is a lot of support for this. This is going to be continuing revenue. It's a great bill from Representatives to be able to continue revenue back into our China International District, to be able to, in Pioneer Square, and to be able to deal with, make sure that we have historic preservation of all those amazing brick buildings that if there's an earthquake are going to crumble. And with FIFA coming, we want to make sure that our International Chinatown and Pioneer Square continue to be, you know, they're going to be visited by so many people, and we want to make sure that this is something that can sustain for generations to come. And so this is a really unique opportunity, and we have to get it done this year.
Thank you. I'm going to take just a moment and highlight a couple things because that was great advice. You talk about come down and testify and wear something the same and have something very obvious. So if you look at the front row here, you can see a few people on the end, purple sweatshirts, holding signs. Can you stand up for just a moment? This is a great example of what she is talking about. It's very clear to everybody what you are there for, what you're advocating for, who is showing up, and it's very helpful to legislators.
And I would also say, the rules in the House and the Senate are different. So, some of you know this. I think what you are wearing, I mean, you're not going to be asked to take off your clothes. If you come to the House, you're not going to be asked to take off your clothes. But just so you are aware, know that no props are allowed in a House committee room. Stickers are okay, but signs are not allowed. So I just don't want anyone to feel like they've been misled.
Absolutely, thank you for that. And to your point, there's another great example here. Up here, front and center, are great ways to show up if you're following the advice on how to show up and advocate and get these bills through their chambers to the governor's desk and signed. Our next question is, people are losing housing, people in homes, owners and renters, rent, taxes, inflation are going up, and there are hundreds of homeless people outside. All levels of government are in budget deficit. The city, county, state, nationally. What realistically can we do now in 2026 or 2027 to address this?
We can start briefly just with the Senate side of things. So, you know, I think a couple of bills did make it out of the Senate, and I'm sure the House also has sent us some good bills over too. Senator Alvarado has 5993. This is about medical debt. Is one of the primary causes for personal bankruptcy, and so it curbs financial strain by capping interest on medical debt at 1%. We have the Senate Bill 6162 from Krishna Dawson, and this builds on what we did a few years ago to further expand the senior citizen property tax relief program. This actually was brought to us by advocates around the Black Home Initiative, and so it creates a standard $7,500 deduction for those who qualify and helps consolidate the state's property tax into one part that is going to be clearly about education. And this is the opportunity to help keep our seniors and those with disabilities and disabled veterans in their homes and streamline property taxes statewide. So that did pass. It's 6162. I'll stop with those two. And I know the House sent us one over around being able to do land banking so that we can actually build more social housing and others, and to be able to make sure that you know, people can stay in their homes regardless of whether your incomes go up or down, but making sure that people can stay in communities. So those are a few.
I can pick up from there. While we've seen a lot of issues with budgets recently, I'd say housing is one of the bright spots in terms of how much we've been funding the Housing Trust Fund. The state's been putting hundreds of millions of dollars into that bucket of money for Congress to build affordable housing. While that does not come online immediately, it is 100% necessary to get affordable developments built. So that's in the capital budget in a place that I feel good about and proud of what we've done with our budgets. Senator Alvarado and myself have a bill with the governor to allow residential development in commercial areas. The housing trust fund side is great, like we need to put government resources towards that, but when we need something like 1 million houses at $300,000, we're talking about like hundreds of billions of dollars that the government can't fund. And so we really need the private sector to take a large role in this. And so opening up some of these regulatory and permitting issues, like letting people build residential housing in commercial areas, is sort of part of that picture on the supply side, making sure that we can do it in a way that we still have walkable commercial areas, but not having these yawning commercial zones that empty out at night, and then also fall into sort of these issues of disorder. We can have livable, walkable areas that mix both residential and commercial. On the finance committee, we had some great bills around land banking, so that when land is developed, they can at least stay in public hands. Well, we build the housing on top of that so that it stays more affordable, even as costs go up over time. And then we have other small bills around making sure that people who are like nonprofits who are building community housing or affordable housing can activate that space before housing becomes available, right? Like these projects take a long time, you need to permit them, you need to get financing, but sometimes you can use that space for community events, and right now they can lose their tax exemptions if they loan it out or rent it out to other nonprofits. We have a bill in finance that Rep. Santos and I were able to vote on that says these community nonprofit housing developers can keep their tax exemptions and activate that space for community purposes while they go through that development process. So I think it's going to be basically all hands on deck, both government help, government regulation like rent stabilization that we did last session, funding, government funding, but also in the private sector so that we can really take on this huge problem.
All right, hopefully we can get one more question after this. It'll depend on how quickly we get through this. Healthcare is a critical issue right now. Thank you, Senator Saldaña, for helping critical healthcare legislation get through the Senate. Will Representatives Street and Santos assist healthcare legislation through the House so we can transition to universal healthcare as quickly as possible?
Yes, I would love to know what bills those are before I commit to them, but yes, making sure that healthcare is widely available is a priority of mine. Single payer is a thing that I would support. So I believe we are likely aligned there, but finding what those exact bills are that you'd like to see progress on is definitely something I'd be interested in.
And joining with Representative Street and saying absolutely universal health care is something that I think all of us believe in. I will just note one of the funding opportunities in one of the bills that has been running through deals with this thing that I never knew I needed to know about, which is called the 340B program, around access to prescription medications. It really particularly hurts our community-based health clinics to not be able to access this 340B program. And so it is going to require funding in the budget. We don't know if that funding is going to be there. I know several of us signed on to letters in the House. I'm sure there was one in the Senate saying, please, this is critical to support our community health clinics, which are oftentimes the last resort. And then the last thing I would say is, don't forget, we are very fortunate in the 37th district to have easy access to 2 public health hospitals, one being Harborview, which is a public regional trauma center, as well as Valley Medical. And those hospitals also require support from 340B.
All right, final question today, and there were a few that we didn't get to. I do want to remind people that there are many ways to contact and communicate with your representatives to get your questions answered or more information on anything we talked about today, and information is on that back table over here. So final question, as we discuss our most vulnerable populations, the 37th LD is disproportionately represented in the Washington Department of Corrections. This population is forgotten, yet connected to the children and families here in our district. What are you committed to do to undo the inhumane cultural and environmental policies to center humanity, healing, and justice?
Well, I would start by saying it has to start in our education system. We all know that there is a school to prison pipeline. And back in 2016, we enacted legislation that brought an end to mandatory long-term expulsion and suspension in our schools. We have a long ways yet to go on another aspect of that bill, which is to help train our educators to recognize cultural bias and different ways of expression. This year, we passed legislation, House Bill 1795, which is heading over to the Senate, to deal with training around isolation and restraint. That bill is notable for saying we prohibit chemical, physical, and other forms of restraint on our children, because touching a child, restraining a child can be traumatic. And we put a prohibition on the building of future isolation rooms. There's a whole work of a whole body of policy that has yet to be done on the isolation side, but we are moving forward on restraint. And then I will probably ask Representative Street to talk about our disappointment. Sorry, but we had a very traumatic week this last week with the big loss.
Yeah, we probably should have gone about this in the opposite order, so we hit it on a bright note. Okay, great. What brings the sunshine here? We just got through what's called policy cutoff, so that's where if a bill is passed, it dies. One of the things that I think all of us have been talking about as one of our top priorities is fixing our JR system, or starting to fix that. Many folks are probably aware that at Green Hill and some of our other youth detention centers, the number of kids that we have decided to lock up, plus the number of folks that we have not asked to staff it, the shortage of staffing that we're having, is forcing kids to be confined for 23 hours a day, peeing in bottles, pooping in bags. Like, this is inhumane. And these are folks, like, when you think of foster kids and people who are incarcerated, those are some of the folks that the state are most responsible for. We had two bills last session that fell apart and died. Rep. Cortez and Chair Bergquist did yeoman's work on another bill this year to try and start rectifying some of that. That was another fatality during the cutoff, which was very hard on our caucus. So, like, while we are all aligned on this, one of my points is come talk to some of your other Democratic legislators, because it died within our caucus. It wasn't even a PR thing, it was within the Democratic. So SAR, I think, is really important. And so that was the hardest thing so far this year, both on the House and probably the Senate. My one spot of brightness is working with constituents like Maja. She had a great idea for how we could make sure that folks who are already incarcerated can use their money a little bit more. So when you send money to an incarcerated person, it is subject to fines, fees, LFOs, child support, which, depending on where that money is going, is a righteous place. However, DOC can deduct that money so far that they don't really have money to use while they're incarcerated for essentials. They have a commissary account right now, that limit is $25. They can't deduct anything after it hits $25. However, that is not enough to get by. So working with Elijah and some other advocates, we have a bill to raise that to $100 and then have it increase with the cost of living, so that folks, when they do work, when they do get money sent in from the outside, they have money to use inside. It does not excuse them from things like child support. It does not get rid of their LFOs. It just ensures that they have money to operate on the inside.
The caucuses that we have now, but still, when it comes to children, and policing children's bodies, and actually doing the harms in our correctional facility, this is a place where Democrats have to do more work together. But 37 is a place where we do lean into this. But in order for us to have Democrats at the state level actually willing to do that hard policy, we need a lot more work. I just, on the way home from this week, was listening to In the Meanwhile. It's a new podcast that if you guys haven't listened to, it's Marcus Harrison and Nora. And they just interviewed, I think this person's actually going to be at Town Hall tonight, Emily Galvin Alonso with Partners for Justice, talking about the price of mercy. So definitely think everyone should listen to this. So I think the one positive is that we did pass ethnic studies bill, and that's in the House as well. I was just checking with my staff the bill number. But I think this is how we do it, is through education and changing. I grew up not even knowing that there were 39 sovereign nations in the state of Washington, right? And I grew up going to school in Seattle. And so when we're thinking about Black Lives Matters and ethnic studies, our students people are the ones that are reminding us that we have got to do better. But as adults, we need to keep on learning because it shows up in the legislature of us not failing and not being able to advance policy because we have to undo the racist education that we received. And so do appreciate so many leaders that I see here that do that work with us. But just want to remind us that we have a lot of treasures and resources in this room. So as we're wrapping up, I would really, really encourage everyone to meet someone that you do not know, because I am looking out here and every one of you is a leader in your community and is a resource that allows us to be able to represent as well as we do, is because we have experts and deep experience that are willing to keep on engaging with us and pushing us to do better when we're in the legislature. So thank you for being here today.
Thank you. Well, I mean, In the Meanwhile with Marcus Harrison Green and Nora Kenworthy is an excellent show, and I would not be doing my job if I didn't mention that it airs on KVRU 105.7 FM and kvru.org, along with a couple of other interesting programs, along with what we just talked about. Beyond Bars, Through the Wire are two shows that actually air Mondays on KVRU that featured award-winning incarcerated journalists talking about some of the issues that you were just discussing just now. Excellent, excellent show that I highly recommend on KVRU 105.7 and kvru.org, streaming everywhere. Now, we will take this time to do very brief closing statements, about a minute each, just your final thoughts on how constituents can reach you in the future.
All right. Well, I mean, we still have a lot of work to do. I'm looking forward to putting on a lot of those House bills. And I will just be remiss to say that this is my next year where I'm supposed to, that this will be my last session as your state senator. It has been 10 years. It has been amazing. I don't know how you do 29 years. I'm celebrating one of my colleagues in our last Labor and Commerce Policy Committee this Tuesday, Senator Conway. He served on that committee for 34 years. And he and I are both saying that this is our last session because I need to be home and be closer and to our communities in this moment, and just want to thank you so much for investing and voting for me, and it's been the honor of my life to represent the 37th. I will still be your senator all the way through this year, but if you haven't had a chance to come down to Olympia and visit our office, I'd love for you all to come down, and our staff would love to welcome you in. We want to make sure that folks have that opportunity to come and visit us and see your state capital. So thanks so much, and look forward to keep on working for you.
I would just say a couple of things.
She's running for King County
First of all,
Executive.
Let me say, thank you, Senator Saldaña. You have been an incredible partner in the Senate, the public service to this been fierce and formidable. And so we very much appreciate all of your service, and you will leave your footsteps permanently for someone else to follow. And so thank you very much. I want to thank Crystal for being the best moderator that we asked for. Thank you so much also for your service to the 37th District, keeping us informed, keeping things lively, making sure that we come together as a community. Thank you, ACRS, for supporting us again in our meeting. We were jumping around for a while, but last year we had our town hall meeting here, and we asked people if you enjoyed coming here, and it was a resounding yes. So thank you again for supporting us as part of their civic education and democracy program here at Asian Counseling and Referral Service, a nonprofit mental health and social service agency that serves multilingual members, not just in Seattle, but throughout the county. Thank you so much. I want to acknowledge the Office of the Insurance Commissioner is here. We have one of our own. Thank you so much for being here. We have information about Shiva, which is your health navigator if you are transitioning and needing assistance and trying to find the right plan for you and your family. They have a lot of materials. I do want to thank my seatmate. He has been an incredible seatmate. I know I will continue to get to work with him, but I just want to publicly acknowledge Chippewa Street as being just an extraordinary collaborative partner. Finally, I want to thank all of you. Again, showing up on a Saturday at 10 o'clock. I don't know about all of you, but I did have second thoughts this morning. I realized, oh yeah, I kind of have to be here. But I didn't get home until about 11 last night, so from Olympia. So I did think about it. But really, you are why I do this job. The issues that you bring forward, the issues that you have really put into my heart and my stomach over my entire lifetime are what make this job meaningful, and you bring me joy every day when I get to see you coming down from Olympia. So thank you.
I can't say that much better, so I won't even try. I will say it's been a pleasure serving the Leading Center Zone. Your shoes will be large to fill for whoever does that. Yeah, it's been a true pleasure. As Representative said, you guys are the reason why we do this. It has been a pleasure serving for you guys, learning more about the community, bringing the values of this community down to Olympia, bringing the values of this community to our caucus, making sure that our caucus moves forward, and we talk about some of those bills that didn't pass. But the last group of folks, I'd like to say thank you to our folks that make all of this happen, because it is not us. Like, we get to sit up here and talk about all the work that's being done, but these folks really make Olympia work, and that's our staff. So my LA
So Teresa Arciniega Ruiz is my LA, and then my session aide, Cynthia, and then our intern, you got to Tacoma, Elijah, do the time.
It's really staff who makes the legislature go around, and we couldn't do this without them. So thank you very much. And thank you guys for coming out. And I will at least be around for a little bit longer if you'd like to chat. And we're looking forward to the next one. This is my favorite event of the legislative session.
Absolutely. So thank you everyone for coming. Your legislators will be around for the next little bit. Please also make sure to grab some some coffee and donuts. There are still some back there in the corner. Nourish yourself, treat yourself, and have a wonderful rest of the day. Thank you.
Absolutely. And we have a 60-day.
Rock King's Donut.
Yeah. I mean, we have the office of, what is it?
Sorry.
Thank you so much.
Thank you.
I like yours.
that one that's always been considered a backwards? I think I'm just gonna keep walking. watching, especially transit fans who stuck it out till the end. Up next, I think I might be going to Winter at the Waterfront. Definitely going to the Transpunk Showcase at Chop Suey tonight at 5, and then possibly Emo Night Tour at El Corazon. Let's find out.